We all love to talk about our favorite things, right? Like, we have favorite things that we like to talk about all the time. Maybe it's a sports player like LeBron if you're a basketball fan, or maybe a soccer player. No, maybe it's a pig if you're a fan of pig sports. I don't know. Or maybe it's like a band that you really like. Maybe you're a really big fan of, I don't know, BTS. Are people still fans of BTS? No? 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 Okay, cool. Then K-pop.
Always that same.
Okay. Well, anyway, no one's a fan of them in here. That's good. But we all have things that we like to talk about. And actually, because clearly I have no idea what you guys like to talk about, we're going to shout it out on the count of 3. Wait, your favorite thing to talk about, don't do it yet. And we're going to make sure that they can hear us because we want them to make sure that they still know that we're here, right? Okay. What?
Think of it. Actually, think of it.
All right, you have to think of it. So we're going to do go on 3, okay? So 1, 2, 3.
Hunting!
I heard hunting, water balloons.
No, water sprinkler.
Water sprinkler. Okay, anyone else? I couldn't hear. Thing. What? Things. Okay. Anyone else? No? Logan, what'd you shout?
Video games.
Video games? Okay. Haley in the back, what'd you shout?
I said
Minecraft YouTubers. All right. So now here's a fun thing we're gonna do. I'm gonna say some of the things that I just heard you say, and you're gonna shout for joy if you love them, or boo really loud if you don't enjoy them. Okay? Does this make sense to you? All right. So we'll start with Minecraft YouTubers. Shout if you love it, or boo if you don't. On 3. 1, 2, 3. I heard some mixed. How about water sprinklers? On 3. 1, 2, 3. How about hunting? On 3. 1, 2, 3. Video games on 3. 1, 2, 3. Wow, that was so mixed. I can't tell the difference between your yays and boos. I love it. It's like sports stadiums. You can't tell when people are booing or shouting for joy. It's very challenging. Anyway, we all have things that we love to talk about. And in fact, most of these things, they're probably not hard for you to talk about. In fact, you probably talk about most of these things every single day. You probably talk about hunting probably every day. You probably talk about video games every day. YouTube, video games. Do you talk about water sprinklers that much?
Every day.
Every day. Wow, Liam talks about water sprinklers every single day.
Even in winter?
In fact, do what?
Even in winter?
Even in winter.
Always.
Always, specifically in winter, right? All right, cool. Well, Liam likes to run through water sprinklers in the winter for everyone on YouTube. I just needed everyone in the world to know that. Anyway, we probably make a habit out of all of these things. Like all the things that we love talking about, we make a habit out of talking about them. Meaning that it's a routine behavior that we tend to do a lot. Talk about every day. I know when I was your age, I definitely talked about video games probably every day. It was probably either Minecraft or Halo, I think, or maybe Call of Duty at that point. I'm not sure. It was one of those things that I talked about probably every single day. Or maybe soccer. Does anyone like soccer? I know you guys play soccer. Do you guys like talking about soccer?
Yeah.
Yes? Yeah, maybe? I know I talked about that a lot too. And even though we all have different things that we like to talk about, I think the reason that we talk about the things we like is the same for all of us. Because we want other people to experience what we love, right? We want other people to experience what we love. If it's a movie that we saw, or a place we visited, or a sport that we play, or a game that we've played, we love talking about the things that we've personally experienced in a positive way because we want other people to experience the same positive feelings that we experienced. Maybe if you love soccer, you talk about it with your siblings so that they'll also love soccer. Maybe if you love makeup tutorials or Minecraft tutorials on YouTube, you talk about, specifically, like, if you like makeup tutorials, you talk about how you can contour and poof and puff and boom and then you're pretty. You like talking about that with people. Or maybe we love collecting sneakers, and so then you talk about sneakers with your parents so that maybe they'll buy sneakers for you for Christmas. We talk about the things that we're really into, the stuff that we really love, the stuff that we want other people to experience. And it's a really easy thing to make that a habit in our lives. And I'm going to let you in on a little secret, okay? This is a little secret. Talking about God can actually be a lot like this. It can be a lot like this. Regularly sharing about God with others can be an everyday part of our faith. Now, I know that a lot of us are here at church for different reasons. Maybe your parents force you to come. Maybe you're here because, like, you're interested. You're like, what is this? Or maybe, like, you're half in, you're like, I kind of like the game part at the beginning, but I'm not really a fan of this part where you're talking. And that's okay. Thank you for still listening to me as I give this example. Or maybe you're here for all of it. You love all of C3 and you're all in. You want to follow God and do what he says. And wherever you're at, I actually think that talking about God is actually a really helpful habit for each of us to develop, no matter where we're at or why we're here. And that's because the more we talk about God, the more we'll know him. And the more we know him, the more we'll want other people to know him, and we'll want them to experience what we've experienced. And for many of us, talking about God can actually be really scary. That's kind of the challenge of talking about God. I know that maybe you're afraid to talk about God because you don't really know, you don't feel like you know enough. Like you don't know all the Bible verses or the references or like all the things in the Bible. You don't know all the stories. You're like, I don't know enough big words or anything, so you're not sure if you should talk about God because you're not sure if you know enough. Or maybe you feel like it'll be awkward. Maybe you're like, I don't like awkwardness. No one really likes awkwardness, right? I know I avoid awkwardness. And maybe that's why you don't want to talk about God. Maybe that's why you're scared to talk about it. Maybe you're curious about what it means to follow Jesus and you feel like you should know, but you don't want to talk about what it looks like to follow Jesus because like you're afraid of embarrassing yourself. Or maybe you're not sure what to think. And even if you believe in God, you think you understand him, you're not positive you have it all figured out. So you feel like you can't talk about it because you don't want to look dumb because you're not sure if you have it all figured out. And so often we treat God like a math problem. How does a math problem work? 1 plus 1 equals 3, right? Geometry. Anyone call me on that math? No? Okay, cool.
8 plus
all right.
2 plus
Today,
2
math
equals
is 1 plus 1 equals 3. Got it. No, but we treat God like a math problem where we have to know all of the things before we can talk about him. But what if I told you that actually you don't need to be afraid of talking about God, and even if you aren't sure what you think about God or you don't think you know everything about God, that's totally okay. None of us actually do. None of us know everything about God. The best way to get to know him better is to start talking about him with other people. Now, if that totally freaks you out, I mean, I get it. But what if you thought about it this way? When you talk about God, then you don't have to talk about what you know, but you have to talk about who you know. You don't talk about what you know, you talk about who you know. In fact, this is how the church got started. They didn't just go start spouting off the Old Testament verses and then everyone started following Jesus. No. What happened was people talked about their real life experiences with a person. That person was Jesus. People 2,000 years ago, they're like, hey, we came across this guy, Jesus. He was really awesome. And then he straight up died. He died and then he rose from the dead. And everyone was like, oh, we gotta tell everyone about this because this shows us that God is doing something new in this world. And so they talked about their experiences with the person of Jesus. They talked about him a lot, and that's how that's how Christianity spread across the world, is these people talked about their experiences with a person. In the Bible, in the book of Acts, it actually gives us an amazing picture of what this looks like. 2 of Jesus' followers and friends, they were named Peter and John. They were followers of Jesus, they were friends with Jesus while he lived on earth. And after he died, they saw him risen and not dead. And they were like, whoa, we gotta tell everybody. So they told everybody, and they were really courageous and said it in front of a bunch of like religious leaders, in front of a whole bunch of people. And this is the people who were listening. This is their response that we're about to look at. So it's Acts 4:13. When they saw the courage of Peter and John and realized that they were unschooled, ordinary men, they were astonished, and they took note that these men had been with Jesus. So, a couple things that, there's like 2 things that I found really interesting about this verse. First of all, that they noticed, hey, these guys, they don't have a lot of education. They don't know a lot of big words or fancy theology or anything like that. But clearly, because of how they talked and because of the way they talked about Jesus specifically, talking about who they knew, the people realized, oh, they actually know God. They knew God. And because of Peter and John and how they talked about God, many of the people who were watching, who were listening, they wanted to know God too, through Jesus. And here's what's cool. I think this can actually be true for us. We may not have all the answers. We may not be the most knowledgeable about all the Bible and have all the things memorized. But what we can do is we can talk about what we've experienced. We can share what we hope to learn about him as we grow in faith. We can talk about what other people have experienced that we've heard about, because talking about God can help us know him better. And the more we share our thoughts and experiences and even our questions, those are good to share too, about God with others, the more we'll be challenged to keep talking, keep growing, and keep getting to know God ourselves. We'll make sharing about God an everyday part of our faith. And because talking about God helps us to know him better. And so how do we actually do that? How do we make talking about God a thing that helps us to live out our faith? Because that's our goal for you guys, is to be able to live out your faith. Own your own faith. And the first thing I want you to remember is that you don't need to know everything to talk about God. A lot of us feel like we need to know everything, but we don't. We don't need to know everything to talk about God. Peter and John, they weren't the smartest or most educated. We see that, like if you go through the Gospels, the books with Jesus, Peter and John are in there. Specifically Peter makes a bunch of bad decisions. He's not the smartest guy. And that's okay. They got to know God in real ways. And they let that be their motivation to talk about God. Not to be impressive in front of everyone. That wasn't their motivation. Their motivation was their experiences with God were so incredible, so compelling, that they wanted other people to experience what they've experienced. And we can do the same. We can focus on who we're talking about instead of worrying needing to know all the facts and the verses and the theology, all that. Instead, we can talk about who God is, what his character is like. So if you don't know how to talk about how God created the world and ins and outs of that, maybe you can talk about how creative God is to make the world we live in. If you can't explain maybe how God forgives us exactly, you're not sure how that works, then talk about what it feels like to be forgiven and have the unconditional love of God. Maybe while you might not be able to explain why bad things happen, you can explain or talk about how God has comforted you when you've experienced hard times. You see, we don't need to know everything to talk about God. All we need to do is share what we know about him from having a relationship with him. Now, I know for a lot of us that's not easy, and maybe you're not even sure about all this God stuff. Maybe you don't even believe in God, and that's okay. I think that even you can start talking about what you're not so sure of. Like, if you're not sure that God made the world, talk to someone about it. If you're not sure that Jesus forgives us, talk to somebody about it. If you're not sure that God can comfort you when bad things happen, talk to somebody about it. Share the questions you have with your small group leader or trusted friend. Simply start the conversation about God and see what happens. After all, we don't need to know everything to talk about something, right? We don't need to know everything to talk about something. And finally, one of the last things that we can learn from Peter and John is that we can talk about God by sharing what he's done in our lives. What I love most about this story, if you go back, you can do it in small groups if you want, and look at the story that Peter and John told, but they told about their experience with the person of Jesus and how they experienced him in their everyday life. And they might not have been able to answer all of the questions that people had, but they could talk about what they'd experienced. They could tell their stories. And I think you can do that too. Talk about what's happened in your own life. If you've seen him answer a prayer, share that. If you've seen him change your attitude toward a sibling or a friend, talk about that. I literally heard a story this past week about someone who experienced this, where she prayed for her or this person to change, and instead, actually, God changed her heart toward this person. And so instead of being annoyed by this person, she all of a sudden was like all for this person and could see them with love like God saw them. It was an amazing story. And maybe you've seen him do something amazing in your life or the life of someone around you. Share that. Tell your stories. Talk about what you've experienced. Focus on who God actually is to you. As Peter and John, they kept talking about God. Peter and John, they kept talking, and then thousands of people heard about Jesus and decided to follow him. And not only that, they wrote down their experiences, and then millions, maybe even billions of people have heard about those experiences since then and have decided to follow Jesus because of what they've written down. That's actually what we see in a lot of the Bible, is Peter and John, they wrote down some of the books of the Bible. So remember, talking about God, it won't just help others know God better. Talking about God helps us know him better too. So talking about God can be a habit in our lives, and that will help us get to know him and live out our faith. And here's the good news, guys, this will be the easiest application you've ever done in your lives. Because guess what? Small groups is a great place to talk about God. Whoa, we're going to do it today. We're going to start the habit today. All of us, we're going to talk about God a little bit. And if you have questions about God, ask them in small groups. Or maybe you want to know more about Him, tell your group. Maybe you have an experience you want to share, tell your group. All of these things can happen in our small groups. Because these groups, we want to help each other get to know God better. So as we go into groups, ask yourself this one question while I pray. What's one reason you struggle to talk about God? Dear God, thank you for this day. Thank you for all these wonderful people. God, I pray you will bless our conversations and our time together. And also bless our wonderful 8th graders who are all moving up to high school and C4 and all of the fun summer activities we have planned for them. I pray that you will bless them in that. And also, we're excited to have all the new people, all the new 6th graders. I pray that you will help us to love them really, really well as they're moving up into a new season of life. God, we love you and thank you. In Jesus' name, amen.